Hello again, ¿cómo está? There's an old saying, are you nuts? And I've heard that all too many times referring to me, and in part maybe I was a little bit. But the beauty of that is I've learned all kinds of things that you can do for mental health. I'm just kind of having a little fun there, but have to do with mental health, whether it's depression, schizophrenia, different things like that. I want to touch on a couple things here that can be critically important to a person. Niacin is something that's one of the first things that I used probably, 20 years ago when I started all this. And I've got my cheat sheet here because I have to just pronounce this properly. But there are different forms of niacin, of course. This one is straight niacin, and this one will cause the flush, whereas the other ones do not. There's niacinamide, there's inositol. Now that's where I catch it wrong. I always say inositol hex, but inositol, hexane, niacinate, close enough. The sustained release in those I never use just because that's known to be issues with the liver. There's just no reason to use it in my view. Niacin has been one of those things that has been used for many years, many decades. As a matter of fact, Dr. Abram Hoffer did a lot of work with niacin and schizophrenia, and he had amazing success with it. I think he had somewhere on the order of, I'm going to say around 80% cure rate. And that's Dr. Abram Hoffer. Now you can get his book. You can get his book online, but one of my favorite doctors is Dr. Andrew Saul, and he's got a site called Doctor Yourself, and he's got some excerpts and stuff like that of Dr. Hoffer's from Dr. Hoffer's books. He was very good friends with Dr. Hoffer, so he's got a lot of great information on there as well. But I would suggest that you go there and look at some of his information, maybe buy Dr. Hoffer's book or whatever Dr. Saul has got to offer, because generally speaking, he gets much of his information from some of the best of the best. I love the guy. I forget about mentioning his name, but he's got some terrific information on there. For me, I want to say what I've used it for a couple times. I've not suffered schizophrenia, fortunately. I've had issues in the past, but it's amazing when you quit drinking and when you eat right, the things and don't do drugs, prescription included, especially prescription, how things tend to melt away off into the distance. But I still take niacin for the simple fact that I'm quite sensitive to things where my heart in particular, quite sensitive to things that most people are not. My one little, we'll call it a vice, but it's not really a vice, I love dark chocolate. It's one of the things that I allow myself to eat pretty regularly. But if I don't take a little bit of niacin, because of having histamine problems in much of my life, histamine intolerance problems, I'll get some flutters and stuff like that, misbeats, PVCs and different, but depends on the chocolate too, oddly enough. But that'll be something that if I take a very small dose of this, that helps dramatically. So one of the things that I've talked about before with angina and things like that with heart disease, angina in particular, oftentimes what they don't address, again, they will talk about coronary artery disease, and they'll talk about, but what they never talk about is the constriction that histamine mast cells cause in the vessel. And then I go back, this is just like migraine headaches. You want to know where that originates? It's not so much that what happens first is the vessel actually contracts really small and then balloons up to 300-400% of what it was. So it's the contraction. That's a histamine problem as well. And again, as I said in my video yesterday, I believe it was, you'll find that 9 out of 10 allergy problems are not allergy at all. It's not an immune response. Generally speaking, it's a histamine intolerance response, and that comes from conception onward. If the mother's taking all kinds of things that cause histamine problems, like antibiotics and poor diet and stuff like that, you're almost guaranteed your child's going to have histamine problems. What can that end up amounting to? Well, you can have somebody who's sexually out of control, for one thing. You can have somebody as they get older. You can have somebody that is very sensitive to pain. There's endless amounts of things, asthma, endless amounts of things that histamine intolerance has to do with. And this is one of the very best ways to address it. Now, for those that have never used niacin like this in this form, this is one that'll cause a flush. And if you're not used to that, it can be pretty nerve-wracking. You know, it's kind of, my son hates it, you know, but, so that's where the inositol hex comes in handy as far as the niacin is concerned, because that one actually is very good for for the psychiatric benefits and stuff like that, just as well as the niacinamide is. But the niacinamide, short story, years ago, and I'm not a believer in cholesterol being an issue at all. You know, that's, you can't live without it, bottom line. But one of the reasons cholesterol goes up and down for various reasons, for one thing, prescription drugs will do that. But you'll find that when a person, niacin is very highly antifungal. And you'll find when people, one of the reasons why they use niacin, the right types and forms, the reason they use niacin is because it eliminates fungus. And what we do know is that when you put fungal mycotoxins in the system, which happens all the time from grains, alcohol, sugar, you name it, cholesterol tends to go up. Surprise, surprise. So I went to a doctor, and he wanted, of course, like every other doctor in today's world, they want to put you on a statin. Again, the blessing of the statin was it was killing me so fast and it hurt so bad that that's when I changed my life back in 2003. And you know, I guess that was the one benefit, but that was one of the first drugs I got off of, like, you know, yesterday. So the doctor, he wanted to put me on a statin. I said, why in the world would I take a statin? You know, I'll take care of my, you know, my health, you know, the natural way. And he thought I don't know if he was trying to be sly or that he just didn't know any better, but he gave me niacinamide. And I told the nurse on my way out, and I said, you realize that this is the type, niacinamide is a type that does not work for HDL. You have to have niacin, and you have to have inositol hex, and you got to have the proper forms for what you're after. So for me, inositol hex and niacin, nicotinic acid, is the way to go. I'll try my best. You remind me to do some videos on histamine intolerance, from everything from sexual health, for you guys that have, you know, premature ejaculation problems and all kinds of issues like that. You know, there are things, or just bloodshot eyes all the time, like I said, sensitive to just any little pain. There's just so many things. Just type in histamine intolerance, and you're going to find a different kind of world. And then you can start addressing it. And the know the cause, the phase 1 diet that I'm so familiar with and I love, and I try to tell people about the antifungal diet, goes a very, very long way in dealing with histamine issues. So I think that's going to be it for now. So if you have issues that you're just, you know, constantly have allergies, just no answers, you want to try some other things, talk to your naturopathic doctor about getting on a good, I mean, it's dirt cheap, getting on a good niacin, whether it's niacin or inositol hex or, you know, what have you. Get it going, give it a try. You'll find that for Dr. Hoffer, he would use thousands of milligrams. Now for me, when I take it, this is only 100 milligrams each. When I take it, I'll take 50 milligrams, and I can feel that flush. So when people, one of the old tests, you know, this, you know, it's kind of a, you know, it's not real reliable, but reliable enough in my own experience. If you take a niacin and you're at a small dose of, let's say, 200 or less, and you're still getting a flush, then you're almost certain to have pretty serious histamine intolerance, mast cell issues. But you know, it's one of those things that it's incredibly safe. Nobody's ever died from taking niacin, just as nobody's died for the last 35 plus years from taking any supplementation, you know, proven killed from an actual supplementation. But drugs, Nagasaki and Hiroshima, those amounts of deaths every year just in this country alone from prescription drugs alone. And we worry about all this stuff that, you know, sleight of hand works great for the profits. But anyway, get on it. If you have mental health issues and other things like that, think niacin. You know, that alone may not be the answer, but it's one that can be a huge part of it. So bless you guys. Thank you very much. See ya.